think about if you slip, where's it going to go? That'll prevent you from having to go get stitches at the doctor. Hey guys, welcome back to the JPM Performance channel. Today we're going to talk about Aero catch latches. If you've been around the racetrack, you have probably seen these. I'm a big fan of them. I've been using them for years and years. They can be a little intimidating to install though. So I thought that I would go over some of the little tips and tricks that I've come up with over the years, as well as a couple of ways to make these things work a little bit better than they do straight from the factory. So we'll start with that to begin with. We're going to have to get up pretty close here. As you can see in here, there's a little spring. Well, this spring, when this latches back, is not quite pushing that all the way back. Look at that. See how this spring is loose in here? Because it's not quite long enough. So when your latch is down, and you'll see people when they pull these up, this is not coming back, so they're beating and they're banging on the hood. Bang, 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 bang. Come on back, because it won't do this. Right? Here's what we have to do to start with. I'll do this little modification and then I'll show you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use 2 small screwdrivers, and I'm going to simply go in here and spread the spring apart to make it a little longer and a little bit stiffer. It's actually pretty easy to do. Almost. A little bit more. Okay, now you can see when that's down, it's coming back all the way now. Well, pretty close. So here's the next problem with these. They have these tiny little nubs. You see, guys, on there, you guys are going to see this. They can't get it to go down. They're beating on it. They're beating on it. They're beating on it, right? You see these guys all the time beating on their Aero catch latches. The issue is that there are 2 tiny little nubs right here. This is kind of a cam, and when you pull this down, I don't know if you can see that or not, but it's actually getting stuck right there. And all it is where they cast this plastic piece. These were probably the tabs where it was mounted when it was cast or formed, or however they make these. Here's what I do. I have a tiny little razor. It's very, very sharp, so you want to be very careful when you do this. Just come in here, slice these tabs off. Be very careful to not cut yourself, meaning don't put this finger here when you're cutting like this. What's going to happen? Boom, 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 right? Whenever you're using a knife or a razor blade or whatever, think about if you slip, where's it going to go? That'll prevent you from having to go get stitches at the doctor. So once we get these little nubs cut off, all of a sudden it goes right down nice and smooth. See that? So you don't have to be bang, bang, bang. Just, those are my first 2 tricks. So now when it's down, we can pull it up, the pin comes back, and then when we go to put it back down, it's easy. Looks like this one could use just a little bit more trimming. I'm sure this is impossible to see. on the camera, but when you have it in your hand, you'll know what I'm talking about. Look how much nicer that is now. Okay, first two tricks. I've already done that on both of them. I've spread this one and I've cut the nubs off of it already, so it is beautiful. Okay guys, some of the items you're gonna need for this. This one is I don't know if you'd call it a knockoff of the original, but it's basically the same. Aerodynamic Plus Flush Kit, Japan.co. I got this with this hood that I bought, D1 generation. I don't really know what it is. It's basically an aero catch. I can tell you that after having looked at these, I would say that the Aero Catch brand is maybe made a little bit better than these, but all in all, they're basically the same. So you're going to get these. They're going to come in this little box, which do not throw away because we will use this as a template. Let's keep this in mind. You can cut this out. You can see I've already cut this one out. So you use that for a template, and it'll also come with all the hardware that you need. You're going to need an Allen wrench and a 7mm wrench. You're going to need some tape. Some of these tools are not for this project. Here's the scissors that I use to cut that out. And that's basically what we need on top of a couple of hole saws. Now I'll use this 1 1/8 and this 1 3/4, and you'll see why I'm going to use those. Now I have already cut this template out and I have already taped the hood, but moving over to what we're actually doing here, you need to find a good spot for your pins. So these pins come with the latches, obviously. And when this is installed in the hood, this comes down and catches this pin and holds the hood, holds your hood down. Now, I don't have these necessarily set at the right depth yet. That's why they're still loose. As a matter of fact, they need to actually come up a little bit. We'll roll these up just a tick. Once you kind of get everything lined up, you can adjust these a little bit in the end. So don't get super worried about, you know, that they're perfect when you make your first cut in the hood. They have to be close, don't get me wrong, but they don't have to be perfect. You need these pins to be in a very good structural part of the car. Honestly, on a Miata, normally I use these where the stock bumpers used to be. But in this particular car, there's an oil cooler mounted under here, so I cannot put it in this hole, and I like them to be symmetrical, so I just moved them out a little bit. So we have our hood fitting, we have our 2 pins in. Let's let the hood down here. So you want to mock up where you want your latch to be. I like to face them this direction versus this direction. I don't know, it just makes more sense to me aerodynamic wise. I don't know that it matters. I'm sure you could do it either way. But I always mount them with the big end towards the front of the car. It just seems like when it's up like this, it's proper for it to close. And so when you're at the front of the car, you actually push this button to release. I don't know that it matters. You can do it either way, but this is the way I like to do it. So, how do we figure out where that pin is under here? If you've been doing any fabrication at all, you know that in fabrication, sometimes you have to eyeball things. So believe it or not, I have the hood kind of fitting the way I want it. I will sit down here with my Sharpie and I will eyeball where this pin is side to side go in this direction. And I'll kind of make a line. And then I'll eyeball it side to side. And I will also make a line. Now this might seem a little imperfect. That's because it kind of is. Now the other thing to keep in mind is this hood is at a bit of an angle. This is not flat to the earth. So when we mount this aero catch on here, we're actually heading backwards ever so slightly. So hold your pin at an angle, the flat angle to the hood, and envision where it's going to come out underneath so that it will engage that pin. If it seems a little imperfect, that's because it is, but that is not the critical thing right now. We just want to get close. We want to get as close as we can. But if you're a tiny bit off, there's still going to be some room for error here. Now this car's been roughed up a little bit, but sometimes if you have a really good car that hasn't had any body damage and you know that you're putting them in these exact holes, you know that you can kind of measure on your hood as well, just to give you an idea of about where you're sitting. These are about a 1/16 off of each other, which doesn't really surprise me considering how everything's kind of lining up on this poor car that's been beat to death over its life. But we can make this work. So the first thing that I like to do after I make my crosses is to drill a little hole here so we can see how accurate we actually are around the pinhole. Now, we don't want to drill this hole too big because right now you can see I kind of put these marks on here myself. And the way that I came up with these is I laid it on the template, on the template right on the latch, and kind of eyeballed right in the center of the slot to kind of make sure that I knew exactly where my slot is. So we know we're going to be sitting about right there. The other thing that I know is that I'm going to be using our hole saws to drill these. So if I know that the center of my hole saw is going to be here, I don't want to drill this hole big enough to where it's going to infringe on the center of my hole saw. So you don't need a super big bit here. I'll use about a 1/4 inch bit, and that'll give me a really good lineup so that we can actually draw our template. Take your little screwdriver, stick it through there, see how accurate you are lined up with your pin. This is about perfect on that one. I'm going to raise this pin up a little bit so that I can see it easier. Just like in any project, guys, the last thing you want to do is to rush it. So take your time, work on getting your pins at the right height and in the right location. Just take your time, because one thing about this project is as soon as you make this hole, you're not going back. So let's make it accurate to begin with. This one's actually very accurate as well. So that's kind of how we get our initial alignment. So again, this is also something that I will just eyeball. You can step back from the car because I want to make sure that this is very straight to the car. I also want to line up my cross. One. Two. Okay guys, now for the fun part. We know that this template fits around our latch. So at the most, we want to make this cut to where I'm going to call it takes out the line. So I'm going to line up my hole saw here very close to the edge. We can always sand these a little bit. And I'm actually going to mark the center of the hole saw right there. A little bit harder with this small one, but you can still do it. You can almost eyeball these. If I was using a drill, I could almost eyeball that, but I prefer to try and make a hole, a center, just to help me align it a little bit. The more precise these are, the better. Okay. Moment of truth time. I'm going to prop the hood up. We're going to go for it. We'll start with our small ones first. So I've installed these in aluminum hoods, steel hoods, fiberglass hoods. Honestly, a hood like this, which is fiberglass, obviously, as you can tell from the shrapnel, is probably the easiest hood to do, just because it cuts so easy. But the last thing we want to do is slip, right? So, don't use your very first one. Let's drill a pilot hole. That's just being smart right there. It is so easy, not as easy with fiberglass, but it is so easy if you're trying to just go for it like this, to slip. And when you slip, these teeth will destroy your paint job. This hood is freshly painted, so we are doing this live, so if I screw this up, you guys are gonna know it. So all of a sudden, I automatically have a nice pilot hole. So you guys probably notice how I braced this hood up. That's why I have lots of distance underneath the hood, because when you're going for it, odds are you're going to make it down to at least here before your muscles pull it back up. So keep that in mind. That's how I like to get the little pieces out. There's another trick for you guys. Two more holes, guys. We're getting closer. Focus. Steady hands win this race. Yeah, it's a little messy. One more tool I forgot to mention, guys. You're going to need something to connect these dots, right? Since I kind of use these tools every day, you know, I've got really good stuff. This is a snap-on reciprocating saw. You can get a regular saw. You can do this by hand with just a little jigsaw. This is kind of the way I like to do it. And so I'll shorten this up, make sure we're not cutting too deep. And obviously this is another main reason why I have this tape here, is to protect the paint also from these guards will have a tendency to mar your paint as well. So just be very careful when you do this. And we'll just follow our line. Okay, breathe easy. Breathe easy. Let's do a quick check to see how close we are. Need a little bit more. I mean, I can kind of press it in there. So that one's pretty close. Yeah, I can kind of force them in. I don't want to quite force them in, but as you can see, you want this to be fairly precise, because these holes that are going to hold these down are pretty close to the edge. So we can't be making this, you know, a 1/4 inch wider. Our holes wouldn't fit. So because we're so close, I'm going to just take a little bit of sandpaper here. We need to clean up the edge anyway. one's really nice. We're going to sand on this one just a little bit more. Look at that. Okay, guys. Time to pull our tape. Which is putting this latch right on the edge of where this faux headlight cover would be. Doesn't really matter, I guess. Normally I wouldn't put it that close, but on this particular car, this is just the way it worked out, which is not the end of the world. We're still going to get good bite into the main part of the hood. So now let's drill some holes and we'll get these mounted. Normally I would not drill all of these at once. I would drill one, put a bolt in, drill one, put a bolt in. But because this is so tight, what I'm able to do here is I'm going to drill all 6, and then I'm going to pull this back out so I can re-clean underneath and get all of the shavings out. I will tell you this, guys, if you're dealing with a hood that is double wall under here like a lot of fiberglass and steel hoods are, don't be afraid to just rivet these down to aluminum or steel. I would get a countersunk rivet, 3/16, but a small countersunk head, and go ahead and you can rivet these down. Because I can get underneath, I'm going to go ahead and put the nuts on. But don't be afraid to use rivets if you think you need to. Now, I wouldn't use rivets here in this application because a rivet is going to pull through fiberglass. So what we're using is a small washer. That one's not in very good shape. Just a small washer on the back side with a little nylock nut that came with the kit. So we'll put all these in, get these started, get them bolted down, and then I'll show you guys how to adjust. We'll go from there. So, kind of funny thing about these washers, and you guys have probably heard me say this before. You know, you buy these kits and they're supposed to be bolt-on. Well, in the racing world, nothing's really bolt-on. These washers are a diameter that are slightly larger than almost what you need on some of these corners, to where I can't get the washer up against the side here. So what I'll do is I'll use these little nippers and I'll nip a side off of a washer ever so slightly to give me a flat edge. And then I can get that washer up against there, because I definitely want to use a washer. Okay guys, just so this video doesn't take forever, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to do this one so you can see how I like to do it. So if you look down inside here, so you kind of line up your hood the way you want it. Our pin's looking pretty good, but it needs to come up and it needs to a slight bend this direction. So once again, this is a little bit of trial and error. Roll this up. Now we're getting to the point where you need to start to snug these down. Really? 18 millimeter. That's kind of bizarre. One of the ways you can keep this from turning is to just put a little screwdriver or a punch in there while you tighten the top one. And it's just good and snug. Okay. It needs a little bend. Don't be afraid. Give it a little bend. Look at that. It's like we need to come up a little bit more. Pretty close. Well guys, by the time I put this one in, put a little bumper here in the middle to bring the center of this hood up, we're going to be looking good. And now, since we have fixed our issue underneath here, you can see it comes right up. Boom. So, here's the other thing. When this is down, that's great, but there's a tendency for it to rock, right? That's why these kits come with these little rubber pieces. So underneath here, we can simply cut this down for the right amount of support, and we'll go from there. I have these They're kind of these bad to the bone hose cutters, which would probably lop a finger off without even blinking. So just be careful when you're cutting stuff, kind of like I was talking about with the when we were trimming the underside. So these need to be just below the hole. So you can kind of guesstimate a little bit. It's always better to cut twice, obviously. If you ever heard the old saying, cut it 3 times and it was still too short. Little bit more. Just slice a little bit more off here. Oh, that's close. Look at that, guys. So now with our rubber piece under there, our hood lines up nice. We don't have any more shaking up and down. That comes right up, just like it should. So as it gets worn a little bit, it'll get better and better, to the point where you won't even have to mess with it. It'll just come right up. But these are a great way to have a very aerodynamic and very positive latch. I've been using these for years. They work really, really good. I'm a big fan. Hope this has helped you guys to understand kind of the way I do aero catch latches. It's basically the latch that I use on all of the race cars that I build. So if you have any questions about the way that I did this today, or a different application that you're using, just ask me below and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. Thanks for watching, guys. Hope this helps you. See you next time.